Patrick and I were talking about one of those nefarious people who's on YouTube all the time. And there's a lot of fakes on YouTube, as you guys know. And this guy was saying the way you invest in real estate is you go out and you start with a 200-unit apartment house for 40 million bucks. Are you nuts? When I was in Sunday school, I was about 7. And my Sunday school teacher asked me, she says, why were the 3 wise men wise? And I said, well, because they were rich. And she goes, no. Why were the 3 wise men wise? I said, because they were rich. And she kept saying, well, why do you say they were rich? I said, well, they had frankincense, gold, and myrrh. And she said, they were rich. She says, no, that's not the answer I'm looking for. The reason they were rich is they always sought the best teachers. And I went, holy mackerel. So Patrick, about 2 years later, when I realized I'm not learning jack from my school teachers, and I go to a really rich kid's school, and I go, how come they're rich and I'm poor? My old man's a head of education, PhD, and I'm still poor. And I realized I had bad teachers. So what happened then is that my poor dad was a pretty good guy. He says, you should listen to your best friend's father, who was rich dad. I said, why listen to him? I said, because he's an entrepreneur. And I said, what are you? My dad says, poor dad says, I'm an employee. And I go, what's the difference? Entrepreneurs must know about money. Employees don't. There was like a big lesson. So the next lesson was this. So I got this job at Xerox. The same story you have is I get my little handy dandy sales planner up. I'm dying. And this guy Sanchez flies in from Western region, Santa Ana. He looks at my sales thing. And I got all these appointments, but no sales, and I'm going to get fired. So I said, I can't, I'm working hard, but I'm going to get fired, because I had no sales. So I go, my rich dad's office was at Waikiki. So I go to rich dad's office and I show him my planner. He looks at it. He goes, well, it's obviously why you're failing. I said, why is that? He says, you're not failing enough. He says, if you want to become successful, you have to step up your failure rate. I went, what? Because in my poor dad's family, the academics family, PhDs and all this, failure means you're not successful. And to my rich dad, failure meant you were getting successful. So his advice to me, and I'm working for Xerox, I'm probably 28 years old. He goes, you gotta step up your failure rate. Find a way to fail faster. So that's when you get creative. I can only make so many sales calls a day. So what I would do at night, let's say I left downtown Honolulu at 5, I would go to this nonprofit organization up the street and I would dial for dollars. So I could make 30 sales calls in a night. And I didn't care if I failed or, I was just dialing to get people to donate money for this charity. And I failed 30 times a night. And I kept failing 30 times. That was my goal, fail 30 times a night. But you know what happened, Patrick? My sales at Xerox went up. But for me to become successful, I had to step up my failure rate, which goes against everything school teachers teach you. So today, the reason I have so much money is because, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is now 25 years old. It's still number 20 in the world. And the academics still say, you still can't write. And I go, yeah, but I can sell. It's a bestseller. And it was turned down by everybody. But one of the biggest advantages I had is that when I wrote the book, I endorsed network marketing. Because in network marketing, if you have a good sales leader, you will learn the number one skill of an entrepreneur's ability to sell. So, I have very similar mindsets, different experience, same experiences. But if I could leave a message throughout, the reason I can buy so much real estate is because I make so much money. And if I don't invest in the real estate, I pay taxes. But most people can't invest in real estate because they don't have any money. Do you know what I mean? They can buy a duplex or something like this. But I'm $1 billion in debt. I borrowed $1 billion to buy all this real estate. And the only reason I can do that is because I know how to sell.
10 years in Iran. I lived there when the whole war happened between Iran and Iraq. And I was born to a communist mother and a capitalist imperialist father. One side of my family would always talk about the fact that rich people are greedy, and the other side of the family would talk about that poor people are lazy. And both of them were both right and wrong. There's greedy rich people and there is greedy poor people. And I know a lot of lazy poor people, and I also know hardworking poor people who have the wrong mindset. So anyways, we escaped. I lived in Germany for 2 years at a refugee camp. which I got the first taste of entrepreneurship there. A Super Nintendo, Super Mario Brothers 2 was coming out. And there was a guy in the refugee camp. His name was Jan Staff. He's no longer here with us. He had a sister who was gorgeous. And I was in love with this girl. And I was 11 years old. I'm like, I got to figure out a way to spend more time with this girl. So I talked to the Jan. Jan was 4 years older than me. And I realized Jan liked video games. And so I said, if I buy Super Nintendo, he can play Super Nintendo and I can play with his sister. This is a great deal. I was 11 or 12 at the time. She was 10 or 11. We were both kids, clueless. So I went to the local swimming pool, and Germans like to drink and they like to party. And it was the year when they won the World Cup. So I went to the local swimming pool and I said, look, you got beer bottles and beer, cans everywhere here. What if I bring this up to you? And I clean it up. I talked to the owner. He said, I'll give you 5 pfennig per. I cleaned house with his pool every day. Eventually, I gathered 250 marks, which is what it cost for me to buy that Super Nintendo. I went to Kaufhof, which Kaufhof is like our Sears. And I went to Kaufhof and I bought the Super Mario Brothers, Super Nintendo. I brought it back to the refugee camp. I was a hero. Everybody was playing with the video games. And I asked Katarina, let's go spend some time together. And we go to the park. That was my first experience about entrepreneurship, that you can make the money out there. Money's out there. There's many ways to make the money. You got to go ask and create some kind of value for you to make it. Then came to the States at 12 years old, Glendale, California, and was there for 6 years, then went to the Army. Then a day before 9/11, I started working at Morgan Stanley Dean Witter as a stockbroker, got my Series 7, 66, 31, 26. As a 21-year-old, I was the youngest broker they hired. And then I went to Transamerica for 7.5 years, and I started my own insurance company. And the rest is history.
But I'll show you what capitalism really is. You've seen the financial statement here. You have income, expense, asset, liability. And employees and self-employed focus here. And then B's and I's, or entrepreneurs like Patrick and myself, focus here. This is called the balance sheet. This is called the income statement. But the big problem here is this word here, tax. And Patrick talked about how taxes wipe you out. So what I had to learn to build a business here by learn how to sell. So what happened is my income goes up here. So as my income goes up here, taxes just take it right away. So I had to find out how I could minimize my taxes legally and increase my income. And the way I do that is as an investor. So what happens for me is, let's say I make $1 million here. Okay, $1 million. If I do nothing, the government takes 60% of that. So I net 400,000 on $1 million. But the reason I had to learn how to invest in real estate was because I come down to the liability column here and I borrow 4 million. So I make $1 million there. And as an investor, which Rich Dad World recommends, is you learn how to acquire real estate. So if I borrow $4 million here, I step up my asset value to 5 million. And because I've stepped up my basis from 1 million plus debt to 4 million, I have a basis of 5 million. I pay no tax. If you understand that, that's why we teach real estate investing and stock investing and stuff like that. But of all the asset classes, it's real estate, because real estate runs on tax on debt. And the more debt you use, the less tax you pay. Because if people like myself and people who borrow money, if we don't borrow money, money doesn't come into existence. The only way money exists is after 1971, when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, the US dollar became debt. So the only way money could be created was for people like me to borrow money. So Ken McElroy and I borrowed $31 million to buy a piece of property in Austin, Texas. So we stepped it up by $31 million. We stepped it up over here to $50 million. And because we have a $50 million asset, the tax laws allow us to pay no taxes, and this income flows into me tax-free. That's capitalism, but they'll never teach you that. So what schools teach you is to be E's and S's, to be employees, especially like a doctor or a lawyer or a real estate agent. But this is what my rich dad taught me, and that's what Patrick Bet-David teaches his guys. So this is real capitalism. And the reason we have Rich Dad's World is so you can learn to do this. Before we came on the air, Patrick and I were talking about one of those nefarious people who's on YouTube all the time. And there's a lot of fakes on YouTube, as you guys know. And this guy was saying the way you invest in real estate is you go out and you start with a 200-unit apartment house for 40 million bucks. Are you nuts? You know, if you buy a $40 million apartment house and you make a mistake, you bought the Titanic. you're going to go down with it. Without real financial education, without coaching, without really good guides like Patrick and I had, the U.S. is now a nation of renters. And everybody's going to rent because they can't afford a house. So that's good news. So that's why Rich Dad World exists, to assist you in understanding how you take $1 million, you borrow $4 million here, you come across here, make income here, and you wipe out your taxes legally. That's what Capitalist Manifesto is about. That's what Rich Dad's about. But I strongly recommend you choose your teachers wisely. This guy he's very popular real estate guy. I wouldn't trust him. I mean, I do not trust him. He says, yeah, just go out and buy a 200 unit. You start big. You got to be crazy.